Welcome to Recognised, where we explore authority, credibility, and the gap between being good at what you do and being recognised for it. Today, I want to talk about something I see constantly, particularly among highly capable professionals. The point where competence stops translating into recognition. What I call the credibility ceiling. There's a psychological assumption many of us grow up with professionally, that if we work hard enough, become skilled enough, and deliver consistently enough, eventually recognition follows naturally. But in reality, that's not how professional visibility works, because human beings don't assess value objectively. We assess it socially, through perception, association, familiarity, context. And that changes everything. One of the most interesting findings in behavioural psychology is something called the familiarity principle. Put simply, people tend to trust what feels recognisable and cognitively easy to process, not necessarily what is objectively best. Which means in professional environments, recognition is often shaped less by raw capability and more by how clearly somebody's expertise is understood, how consistently they appear in relevant contexts, and how quickly people can associate them with a specific form of value. That's why two people with similar levels of competence can experience completely different levels of visibility and opportunity. One becomes highly sought after, the other remains quietly respected. And this is where many experienced professionals become stuck. Because the further people progress in their careers, the more complex their expertise usually become. They know too much. They've done too much. They operate across too many areas. Ironically, that depth can make them harder for the market to categorise quickly. And categorisation matters more than most people recognise. Research from cognitive psychology consistently shows that human beings rely heavily on mental shortcuts when making decisions, particularly in environments overloaded with information. Which means people are constantly asking themselves unconscious questions like, who feels credible here? Who do I already associate with this topic? Whose name feels familiar in this context? That process happens incredibly quickly, often before capability is even properly assessed. This is why visibility alone rarely solves the problem. In fact, more visibility without clarity can sometimes make things worse. Because if people encounter you repeatedly but still cannot clearly articulate what you're known for, why your perspective matters, or where your authority sits, then familiarity increases, but recognition doesn't deepen. And that distinction matters commercially a great deal. The credibility ceiling often shows up quietly, not through failure, but through stagnation. You remain respected, experienced, and capable, but somehow not fully recognise at the level your experience should command. And over time, that creates frustration because opportunities increasingly flow toward people who are easier to understand, not necessarily more qualified. What breaks the ceiling is rarely more effort. It's usually clearer authority positioning, the ability to make your expertise legible, to create stronger associations between your name, your thinking, and a specific category of value. Because recognition is not simply about being seen, it's about being understood quickly enough for trust to form. And perhaps that's the real shift professionals need to make. Moving away from the idea that good work speaks for itself, because increasingly it doesn't. Not in noisy markets, not in crowded industries, not in modern media environments. Good work still matters enormously, but recognition belongs to the people who can make their value visible, understandable, and memorable in the minds of others. Until next time, stay credible, stay visible, and most importantly, stay recognised.